Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do something that might feel a little, well, a little
A
counterintuitive.
bold strategy for sure.
We're going to take a subject that is, let's be honest, often the punchline of office jokes. A subject that most people associate with, boredom, bureaucracy, maybe a little bit of fear.
Oh, yeah.
And we are going to try to prove to you that it is actually one of the most fascinating, complex, and surprisingly high-stakes machines running the entire modern world.
It's a tall order, but I think the source material really supports it. We're basically walking into the one department that everyone interacts with, but almost nobody actually understands.
We are, of course, talking about human resource management, or HRM. And look, I know what you're probably thinking right now.
I guess.
You're thinking about Toby Flenderson from The Office. You're thinking about that endless seminar on password security you had to sit through last week.
Or that awkward conversation about an expense report.
Exactly. That slightly too expensive client dinner. We've all been there.
It's the fun police. The Department of... No, that's the reputation, right?
That is 100% the reputation. But when we started digging into this stack of sources, and we have a really comprehensive overview here, it covers the history, the theory, the law, the future of work, all of it, we realized that that stereotype is just the tip of a massive iceberg. And beneath that surface level of, administrative annoyance, there is this huge strategic engine.
It's the operating system of the organization. And that's really the mission of this deep dive today. We want to peel back that layer of bureaucracy and really understand how the management of people evolved.
Yeah.
Because it didn't just start with someone deciding to annoy you with paperwork. It evolved from a very real, very pressing need to organize human effort on a massive scale. It's a field that sits right at the intersection of psychology, law, high-level business strategy, and increasingly advanced data science.
And the history is wild. That was the hook for me. I was expecting to read about filing cabinets and payroll ledgers.
Some boring stuff.
The boring stuff. Instead, I found connections to the Industrial Revolution. Okay, that makes sense. But also to World War I, shell shock,
Right.
and the Soviet Union.
That's the one. That's the one that usually catches people off guard. The lineage of the modern HR department traces back to some very unexpected places, including, yes, the political control strategies of the Bolshevik Party.
We are definitely going to get into that, because the idea that Stalin and your friendly HR rep somehow share a professional lineage is something we absolutely have to unpack.
We do.
But let's start at the beginning, or rather, let's start with a definition. Before we look at where it came from, what are we actually looking at? When we say human resource management, what does the text actually define that as?
So, if we strip away all the corporate jargon, the core definition from the source material is actually quite specific and I think quite powerful.
Okay.
HRM is defined as the strategic and coherent approach to the effective management of people in a company or organization.
Strategic and coherent. I like those words. It implies it's not just random. It's not just fixing problems as they pop up.
Exactly. It's a system. It's a design system. And the definition goes on to say that the goal is to help the business gain a competitive advantage.
Right.
The whole point is to maximize employee performance in service of the employer's strategic objectives.
I want to pause on that for a second because I think it clarifies a misconception a lot of people have. The goal of HR isn't necessarily, first and foremost, to make sure you, the employee, are happy or having a great time.
No. That might be a means to an end, but it's not the primary goal.
The primary goal is to make sure you are performing in a way that helps the company win.
That is the fundamental truth of the field. And it creates this inherent tension, right? It's all about aligning the human element, the people, with their emotions, their bad days, their ambitions, their whole messy lives, with the cold, hard, strategic goals of the entity.
It's the bridge.
It is. It's the bridge between the human being and the balance sheet.
So, okay, let's go back in time. Because this idea of strategic alignment, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. If you go back far enough, you didn't have HR. You had, what, a master and an apprentice?
A lord and a serf.
A foreman and a crew. Where does the science of this, the management of it, actually begin?
Well, to see the real roots, you have to go back to the 19th century. You have to go back to the Industrial Revolution.
The era of smokestacks, steam engines, and some really dangerous working conditions.
Precisely. You have to imagine the context. You have millions of people moving from these agrarian lives, farms, small villages, predictable rhythms, into these massive, loud, dangerous, frankly terrifying factories.
And initially, the management philosophy was very, very simple, wasn't it?
Oh, incredibly simple. Labor is an input, like
Mm.
coal, like steel. You buy it, you use it up, and if it breaks, you just get more.
It was disposable.
Completely. But the source material highlights a couple of pioneers who started to think differently. Robert Owen and Charles Babbage.
Babbage. Wait, isn't that the computer guy? The difference engine?
The very same. He was a true polymath. Both he and Owen looked at this industrial chaos and realized a simple, but at the time revolutionary, pragmatic truth.
Which was?
They concluded that people were absolutely crucial to the success of an organization.
Which, again, it sounds so obvious to us now in 2026. People are important, duh. But you're saying back then that was a radical, disruptive idea.
It was revolutionary.
Yeah.
I mean, Owen and Babbage actually expressed the thought that the well-being of employees led to what they called perfect work.
Perfect work.
Yeah. They realized that if you grind your workers into dust, if you burn them out, your machines stop running. Without healthy workers, the organization essentially dies.
So it wasn't necessarily coming from a place of pure charity or, bleeding heart altruism.
Not at all.
It was a business decision. It was, hey, let's not break our most important tool.
It's a pragmatic realization of sustainability. It's just good business. If you want the factory to run for 10 years, you can't kill your entire workforce in 10 months.
Except.
And interestingly, the term human resource itself, that specific phrase, was coined by a labor economist named John R. Commons way, way back in 1893.
1893. Wow. I didn't realize the terminology was that old. I would have guessed it was some, 1980s corporate buzzword.
It feels modern, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the concept has been percolating for well over a century. However, the field, as we'd recognize it, with the systems, the measurements, the science, that really started to take shape in the early 20th century.
And this brings us to the efficiency era.
Right. And you cannot talk about this history without talking about one man in particular, Frederick Winslow Taylor.
Taylorism. Scientific management.
Well,
even if people don't know the name, they know the vibe. This is the guy with the stopwatch.
That is the iconic image, 100%. Taylor was an engineer who was absolutely obsessed with economic efficiency, particularly in manufacturing.
So what was his core idea?
He looked at labor as a principal input that could be optimized, mathematically. He didn't see a craftsman. He saw a series of physical movements that took X amount of time and consumed Y amount of energy.
I always imagine this as a terrifying work environment. You're trying to assemble a widget, and there's a guy standing 6 inches behind you, clicking a stopwatch, writing down that you took 0.4 seconds too long to pick up your wrench.
It was incredibly intense. He broke every single task down to its most atomic level. Pick up shovel, lift shovel, throw coal. He wanted to find the one best way to do every single task, to eliminate all wasted motion.
So this was really the peak of treating the human being like a machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it sparked a massive inquiry into workforce productivity. But the key thing here is that the focus was entirely on the body. It was about muscles, leverage, and time. It treated the human element as something to be tuned, like an engine.
No psychology yet.
Zero psychology. It was just physics.
And that works for a machine, right? You can tune a car engine. But humans are. Well, they're messier.
So much messier.
And the source material says the next big shift, the pivot to psychology, came from a very, very dark place.
It did. The text points directly to World War I as the catalyst.
The Great War.
Right. And we have to look at a man named C.S. Myers. In 1921, so right after the war, he co-founded the National Institute of Industrial Psychology.
And this wasn't just some, academic curiosity. This was a response to a crisis.
A huge crisis. The military and the government were dealing with these unexpected problems, specifically shell shock among soldiers.
What we would now call PTSD.
Right. But at the time, it was baffling to the generals. I mean, they had these young men who were physically fit, their muscles worked, their hearts were strong, but they were completely breaking down. They couldn't follow orders. They couldn't function.
So the Taylorism approach failed them completely. The machine was physically fine, but it just wouldn't run.
Exactly. It forced the establishment to realize that you cannot just treat a human like a cog in a machine. If you push them too hard or expose them to too much stress, the machinery breaks in ways that are psychological, not just physical. And this realization that the mind is a massive factor in performance, it bled from the military right into the industrial world.
That is a fascinating connection. So the factory owners essentially looked at the generals and said, wait a minute, if mental stress breaks a soldier, does it also break an assembly line worker?
That's the question that birthed the next era of management theory. And it leads us directly to the most famous study in the history of this entire field.
Ah, I know this one.
If you've ever taken a Psych 101 class, you definitely know this one. The Hawthorne studies,
1924 to 1932, the Western Electric Company.
led by a researcher named Elton Mayo. Now, interestingly, they started out trying to do a very Taylor-style study. They were looking at physical conditions, specifically lighting.
Right. The simple question was, if we make the lights brighter, will the workers assemble more telephones?
That was the hypothesis. Better light equals better work. So they went in, they brightened the lights, and productivity went up.
Success! Science works.
But then, just to be sure, to check their work, they dimmed the lights, they made it darker, and productivity went up again.
They couldn't lose. That's amazing.
They changed the break times, productivity went up. They changed the break times back to normal, productivity went up.
Okay, so they realized it wasn't the lights, it wasn't the brakes, it was something else entirely.
Exactly. They found something much, much more profound. The researchers discovered that stimuli unrelated to money or working conditions, things like simply receiving attention or the social dynamics of being in a special task group, made the workers more productive.
The aha moment.
Yeah.
Just the fact that someone was paying attention to them, that someone cared enough to measure their work, made them work harder. They felt seen.
It was a bombshell. And it birthed what we now call the human relations movement. It shifted the entire paradigm. Suddenly, managers realized they aren't just managing muscles and motion, they're managing motivation, group dynamics, social needs, feelings.
It's almost like they discovered that workers were people.
Or at least that treating them like people was more profitable. And this discovery opened the floodgates for the heavy hitters of sociology and psychology to enter the field.
Like who?
Oh, Abraham Maslow with his hierarchy of needs, Kurt Lewin, Max Weber. They're the ones who really moved the field into what we call organizational behavior. It became about understanding what makes a human tick so you can make them tick more efficiently for the company.
Okay, so we've got the factories, we have the war, we have the psychologists. Now we have to talk about the Soviet Union. Because I'm looking at my notes here, and under the heading, The Origins of HR, I did not expect to see the Bolshevik Party.
This is the surprising fact of the episode for sure. The source material draws a very direct and kind of unsettling parallel between modern HR structures and the org bureau of the Soviet Union.
The org bureau. It sounds like a villain organization in a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? It stands for the Organizational Bureau. It was created in 1919. And if you look at its function, it was, for all intents and purposes, a massive, centralized HR department for the Communist Party.
And what was its job? What was it doing?
Its job was to allocate the party's human resources.
Okay.
It used patronage to place people in positions of power, influence, and control across the entire Soviet apparatus.
Patronage basically means I give you a job, you give me your loyalty.
Exactly. It's the absolute currency of political power. And the source notes that Stalin himself was acutely aware of the importance of human resources. He has a quote in the text that is really striking.
What's the quote?
He said, "Cadres are the most precious and decisive capital."
Cadres. That's a very specific, very military-sounding term.
It refers to the core group of trained, loyal personnel, the leadership. Stalin understood that money, factories, armies, they were all useless if you didn't have the right people running them, people who were completely and totally loyal to the mission.
That sounds uncomfortably similar to a modern CEO giving a speech and saying, you know, our people are our greatest asset.
It's the exact same logic. It is the recognition that the human element is the decisive factor in any large-scale enterprise. But of course, because it's the Soviet Union under Stalin, this logic goes to a horrifying, dark extreme.
The Gulag.
Right. The source references the 5-year plans and the Gulag system as dark examples of the mass deployment of this human resource.
It's a chilling parallel. It really shows that HRM, the science of managing people, is a tool. And like any tool, it's morally neutral.
Absolutely.
You can use it to build a thriving, happy company culture, or you can use it to run a forced labor camp. It's all about the objective.
And it highlights the extreme power that is inherent in these systems. When you view humans purely as capital to be allocated, you can achieve massive efficiency, but you risk stripping away their humanity entirely.
So let's step back from the edge of that abyss and look at how this professionalized in the West. We went from these welfare workers in the 19th century to industrial relations in the mid-20th century.
Right. And the industrial relations era was really defined by one major development: the rise of unions.
Okay, that makes sense. Suddenly the boss couldn't just dictate terms anymore.
Nope. They needed a specialist. They needed someone to sit down at a table and negotiate with an organized workforce.
A diplomat, basically.
A diplomat, a negotiator, a specialist in labor law. And this is when we saw the establishment of major professional bodies. The CIPD in England started way back in 1913. Cornell opened its famous School of Industrial and Labor Relations in 1945.
And the big one here in the U.S., SHRM.
The Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, formed in 1948. It's the largest professional HR association in the world.
So is that where the modern name comes from?
Not quite yet. There was a bit of a terminological split. In the U.S., the phrase industrial and labor relations came to mean specifically working with unions.
I see.
So the internal management of people, hiring, firing, payroll, the day-to-day stuff, that was called personnel administration.
Personnel. It just sounds so bureaucratic. It sounds like a room full of people in gray suits smoking cigarettes and stamping forms.
It has that vibe, doesn't it? It feels very administrative, very paper-pushery. But then in the 1980s and 90s, another huge shift happened.
Globalization.
Globalization. Transportation and communication improved dramatically, the world got smaller, and companies started viewing their employees not just as costs to be controlled, but as assets to be invested in.
And thus personnel officially became human resource management.
Exactly. It signaled a major shift in thinking. You manage a resource. You invest in an asset. It was a conscious attempt to elevate the function from administrative paper pushing to a strategic partner in the business.
So that brings us pretty much to the present day. We know the history. We know the theory. But let's get practical. If I walk into the HR office of a Fortune 500 company today, what are they actually doing all day?
Well, the source material references the Dave Ulrich model, which is a pretty standard framework in the industry. It's a good way to think about it. He breaks it down into three main functions.
Okay, lay them on me. What's the first one?
First, and most importantly, aligning HR strategy and metrics with the overall business strategy.
This goes right back to what we said at the start. If the business wants to expand into Asia, HR's job is to figure out a plan to hire people in Asia.
Exactly. HR cannot be an island. It has to be steered by the goals of the business. Number two is re-engineering organizational processes.
Okay, so making the machine run smoother, improving workflows, communication, that kind of thing.
Yep. And the third function is listening and responding to employees and managing change.
That's the people part. That's the soft skills, the human relations movement legacy.
It is, but it's absolutely critical. Now, if we look at the specific buckets of work, it gets even more granular. You have, for example, staffing.
Recruitment, hiring people.
Yes, but the text makes a point to use the term talent acquisition. It's not just about posting an ad on a job board and hoping for the best.
It's more proactive.
Much more. It's long-term planning. It's about hunting for the specific skills the company's going to need in 5 years, not just the skills it needs today.
Okay, what's another bucket?
Training and development.
Continuous improvement.
Right. And the expert note here is that motivation is key. You keep employees productive and engaged through rewards, performance appraisals, and ongoing training. You're constantly upgrading the machine.
Then there's maintenance, which I have to say makes employees sound like used cars.
It does have that ring to it, but in a way it is similar. It's about retention, keeping loyalty high, preventing your top talent from leaving.
What does that involve?
It includes things like mobility management, which is handling expatriates who move to different countries, for the firm and diversity and inclusion management, which is crucial for global teams.
And of course, the big one that everyone really cares about, compensation and benefits.
The paycheck. This is all about designing the packages. The pay, the parental leaves, stock options, health insurance, gym memberships. This is the carrot.
The primary tool for attracting and retaining talent.
For sure. And finally, you have performance management.
So, the stick.
Or the calibration. I like to think of it as calibration. This is the system that's supposed to align an individual employee's output with the company's strategic goals.
And how do they think about that?
It's often calculated as a function of three things: ability, motivation, and opportunity. Does the employee have the skills? Do they have the drive? And does the company provide the environment for them to succeed?
There is a concept in the text that really stood out to me. It's a word I hadn't heard before. Unitarism.
Ah, yes.
It sounds a bit like a cult. What is it?
It's a philosophical goal of HR in many organizations. Unitarism is the idea of seeing the company as a cohesive whole, like a family or a team.
We're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction.
That's the idea, exactly. The theory is that employers and employees should work together for a common good. HR's job, under this philosophy, is to secure that long-term partnership and build that sense of shared purpose.
It's designed to counter the idea that workers and bosses are natural enemies who are always fighting over the pie,
Precisely.
which is a nice idea, a really nice idea. But let's be honest, sometimes they are enemies, or at least they have opposing interests.
Yeah.
The boss wants to pay less, the worker wants to get paid more.
That conflict is real.
And that brings us perfectly to the next section, the legal landscape.
Or, as I like to call it, HR as risk management.
The source says a huge part of what HR does is just keeping the company out of court.
It is massive. In the modern world, HR is the shield. The text highlights what it calls the Big Four U.S. federal laws that every single HR manager has etched into their brain.
Okay, let's run through them. Because these laws basically define our working lives in America.
For sure. Number one is the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938.
What did that give us?
This is the one that gave us the minimum wage and overtime pay.
So before 1938, it was just whatever the boss felt like paying you.
Pretty much. And for however many hours they wanted you to work, this law established the floor, a foundational protection.
Okay, number two.
The Equal Employment Opportunity Act of 1972. This is the big anti-discrimination law.
Right.
It prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or age.
This is the one that really fundamentally changed the face of the American workplace.
Absolutely. Then number three, the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993, or FMLA.
I know this one. This guarantees 12 weeks of unpaid leave for family or medical reasons without losing your job.
Exactly. So you can have a baby or get seriously ill or care for a sick parent without being immediately fired.
A huge deal for working families. And what's number four?
Number four is the Immigration Reform and Control Act. This requires employers to verify that their employees are legally eligible to work in the U.S.
The I-9 form.
That's the one. And it creates a very delicate balance for HR. They have to obey this law, but they also have to avoid discriminating against people based on their citizenship or national origin.
It sounds like walking a legal tightrope every single day.
It is. And on top of all that, remember, HR also serves as the liaison with labor unions where they exist.
Right.
And the source also mentions that HR industry groups often lobby government agencies, like the Department of Labor, to advance their priorities.
So they aren't just following the rules, they're actively trying to help write them.
They are active players in the political game, absolutely.
Now, let's shift gears. We've talked about the past, but we are living in the future. How has technology just completely changed the game? The source has a whole section on modern HR practices.
The digital transformation has been total. It's touched every single function we've talked about.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about e-recruiting.
Right. Gone are the days of circling ads in the Sunday newspaper with a red pen.
Completely. We moved from that to global automated applicant tracking systems. The benefit is obvious. You have access to a talent pool of millions of people.
And you can centralize everything.
Everything. Background checks, drug tests, initial screenings. It's all in one system.
And the result, really, is that geographic limitations are basically gone. You can hire the best person for a remote job, whether they're in New York or New Zealand.
Yep. And then you have HRIS, Human Resources Information Systems.
The digital file cabinet.
But it's so much more than that. It's the move from these vast rooms full of physical paper files to digital databases that are accessible in seconds. And this is what enables the really big modern trend, HR analytics.
Using big data to manage people.
That's it. You can analyze trends across thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees instantly. You can spot patterns in things like attrition or performance that the human being would never be able to see.
And that leads directly to virtual management, right? We're seeing this everywhere now with the rise of remote work.
The capabilities are pretty impressive. You can onboard and train new employees without ever meeting them face to face.
That feels a little, I don't know, a little cold, doesn't it? Getting hired, trained, and managed entirely by a screen.
It can be. There's definitely a risk of it feeling impersonal.
Hmm.
But the source points out the employee benefit too. Greater control over your work-life balance and your own learning pace. You can do your training modules at midnight if that's what works for you.
True. And this tech also allows for this incredible data prediction. The source says they can now predict turnover risk.
Yeah. That means the computer can essentially raise a flag and tell the boss, hey, based on the data, Bob is 80% likely to quit in the next 3 months.
That is wild. How does it know?
Well, it looks at the data patterns.
Yeah.
Is Bob engaging less in team chats? Is he logging in later than usual? Did he just update his LinkedIn profile and connect with a bunch of recruiters? The AI sees all of that.
That is both incredible and also slightly terrifying. It's like predictive policing for your job.
It's a very fine line. We also see brand new business models emerging because of this tech, like the employer of record or EOR.
What exactly is that?
It's where a third-party company becomes the legal employer of your staff. They handle all the taxes, the payroll, the legal compliance, but you, the client, the actual company, manages the day-to-day work.
Oh, I see. So if I'm a startup, I don't need to hire a full-time HR person right away. I can just hire an EOR to handle all the boring administrative stuff, and I can focus on building my product.
Exactly. It allows companies to focus on their core business rather than on administration. And then, of course, you have specialized HRM consultancies, private firms that you can hire to come in and just design your compensation framework or your recruitment strategy for a fee.
It really is a massive, complex industry. But despite all this sophistication, all this tech, and all this history, HR has a bit of a reputation problem.
You could say that. The villain trope.
The in popular media section of the source material is honestly hilarious. It lists some very famous, very pointed examples.
Who stands out to you the most?
Well, you have to start with Toby Flenderson from The Office. He's the archetype.
The ultimate nag.
He's the fun police. He is the living embodiment of policy and procedure. Michael Scott hates him with the fire of 1,000 suns because he represents the rules. He represents the word no.
And then you have Catbert from the Dilbert comic strip.
Oh, that's a much darker version. The evil director of human resources. He literally designs sadistic policies just to make the employees miserable. He feeds on their suffering.
And then on a more serious, more dramatic note, there's the film Up in the Air.
Right. With George Clooney as the professional downsizer, his job is to fly around the country and fire people.
In that movie, HR is portrayed as this incredibly cold, data-driven function. People are just metrics on a spreadsheet to be cut to save money, and it leads to these absurd and ultimately tragic outcomes for real human beings.
So why this reputation? Why is the HR person so often the bad guy in our stories?
I think it comes right back to that fundamental tension we talked about at the very start.
Yep.
The tension between the administrative and compliance role, the Toby role, the rule enforcer, and the strategic, human-focused role.
They're the ones who have to say no. They're the ones who have to enforce the rules that nobody likes, even if they're necessary.
Exactly. And as we see in a film like Up in the Air, when HR becomes purely data-driven, when it loses sight of the individual, it risks losing the human in human resources. It just becomes resource management.
Which is a perfect segue to the serious stuff, to ethics. Because if you are managing people's livelihoods, their careers, their well-being, you need a code. You can't just be Catbird.
And there is one, a very explicit one. The source outlines the key ethical duties that HR professionals must uphold.
What are the main pillars of that code?
There are 4. First, there are duties to the public. You have to act lawfully and ethically. Don't cover up crimes for the company.
Right. Don't help the company dump toxic waste and then lie about it.
Second, duties to the profession. You have to uphold the reputation of HR. Be professional. Maintain confidentiality.
Don't be the drunk HR rep gossiping at the company Christmas party.
Precisely. Third, duties to your clients and employers. Avoid conflicts of interest. Serve them faithfully. And fourth, and maybe most importantly, duties to individuals.
This is the big one.
Is the one. The code says HR must advance dignity, equity, and safety.
That word dignity is so important. It implies respect. It implies that even if you have to do something difficult, like fire someone, you do it in a way that leaves them with their self-worth intact.
It does. But look, the field is not without its valid criticisms. We can't let them off the hook entirely.
The source was pretty blunt here. What are the main knocks against the HR field as it stands today?
One of the biggest is measurement issues. A systematic review of the research found a real lack of clarity in how HR systems are actually measured. It's often hard to prove the return on investment.
How do you measure something like morale or company culture in dollars and cents?
It's very, very difficult. And there's another interesting finding about effect size. It found that when you correct for the past performance of employees, the perceived impact of all this HR management actually decreases.
Wait, break that down for me. What does that mean?
It suggests that if you just hire good, motivated people to begin with, they're going to do good work kind of regardless of the specific HR policies you throw at them.
So good people are just good people. The management part might matter a lot less than we think.
That's the argument. It suggests that selection is maybe more important than management.
That's got to sting a little for the HR pros. What about bias?
This is a huge modern problem, algorithmic bias. As we move to those AI recruitment tools we talked about, we run into a serious problem. If the historical data you feed the AI is biased, the tool will be biased.
So if you feed the computer 10 years of resumes where only men got hired for engineering jobs,
The computer learns that men, engineers.
and then it starts automatically filtering out qualified women.
Exactly. It doesn't just replicate the bias of the past, it amplifies it and automates it. It's a major ethical challenge.
And speaking of gender, the source notes that women are found to be overrepresented in the HRM field itself.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
It has become a female-dominated profession, which is an interesting demographic detail when you compare to other corporate sectors like finance or IT, which are still heavily male-dominated.
So before we wrap this all up, let's talk careers. If someone listening is thinking, hey, this is actually fascinating, I want to be a part of this machine, what does that career path look like?
It's a huge field. The source says there are 500,000 HR practitioners in the U.S. alone,
That is a lot of Tobies.
and a lot of strategic partners. You really have a distinction between generalists who work in smaller companies and do a bit of everything, and specialists.
And specialists would focus on what?
They focus on one area, like benefits administration or talent acquisition or labor relations.
And at the very top of the ladder.
At the top, you have the Chief HR Officer, or CHRO. They usually report directly to the CEO.
And that's a key detail, isn't it?
It's huge. It confirms that in most major organizations today, HR is seen as a core strategic role. They are in the C-suite, they have a seat at the big table.
So we have come a very, very long way. Let's try to recap this incredible journey.
It's quite a trajectory, isn't it? We went from a few pioneers in the 19th century realizing that, hey, healthy factory workers are actually better workers.
To World War I shell shock teaching us about the importance of psychology and the fragility of the human mind.
To the Soviet Union showing us a dark reflection of how human resources can be used as a tool for political control.
To the complex global digital science of talent management that we have today.
And through it all, that core tension remains. The challenge of managing human capital, the knowledge, the skills, the assets, while never forgetting that they are in fact human beings.
That really is the key takeaway for me. HR isn't just about rules and paperwork. It's about striving for that unitarism goal. It's about aligning the people with the mission.
Yes. And I think for you, for the listener, the learner, I would encourage you to look at your own HR department a little differently after this.
How so?
Don't just see them as the police or the paper pushers.
Mm-hmm.
Try to see them as the architects of the company's culture and strategy. They are, for better or worse, building the environment you live in for 40 hours a week.
That is a great perspective. And to close us out, here is a final provocative thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
The source material makes it very clear that modern HR is becoming increasingly reliant on algorithms, on big data, on virtual management to predict turnover and manage performance. We are getting better and better at measuring the human input.
Okay, Art.
So as we rely more and more on this data to manage humans, are we really moving toward a more efficient and enlightened future? Or are we accidentally circling all the way back to Taylorism? Are we starting to view people merely as inputs to be optimized by a machine? Except this time the machine isn't a guy with a stopwatch. It's an AI with a database.
That is the big question for the next 20 years. Are we using technology to optimize humanity or just to optimize the output?
Something to think about the next time you get an automated email from HR. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.